Gossip Girl.
Hi guys, it's
Lauren Daisy.
welcome back to my channel, and today we're doing a video that I'm super excited about. Today I'm going to be assigning all of the main Gossip Girl characters a Taylor Swift era slash album.
I had to be prepared for a night with Taylor Swift.
I'd seen edits of people, doing this on TikTok, and I thought it would be so much fun to sit down and kind of tell you guys why I picked each character for each era. So obviously we have 10 eras, so I've gone with 10 of who I feel are the most central characters to the show, and that is obviously Chuck, Serena, Blair, Dan, Nate, Jenny, Vanessa, Georgina, Lily, and Rufus. So that's who we're going to be talking about today. And please let me know down in the comments if you agree. I know that there's some that I think maybe I've gone against the grain a little bit. But yes, let me know down in the comments if you agree with, the ones that I have assigned to each character and who your favorite Gossip Girl character is, or your favorite Taylor Swift era, or whatever. Just let me know down in the comments. Is the camera focusing on me or the bucket? I think it might be focusing on the bucket. I'm going to take it down. So the way that I have chosen these, just a little bit of background on my decision making before we get started. I looked at the era itself in terms of the fashion, the kind of outfits that Taylor was wearing, the colors that went along with this era, and also songs obviously from the album. So I've chosen 3 songs from each album that I feel like kind of represent that character. So we're going to go through all of those factors. So obviously we're kicking things off with debut, Taylor Swift, the self-titled album. And for this one, I have gone with Vanessa Abrams. Now, obviously, the first thing that came to mind was the fact that when I see Taylor Swift's like gorgeous curly hair from this era, I do instantly think of Vanessa and her gorgeous hair from the first season of Gossip Girl. She doesn't really have it that much after that, but I absolutely adored it. So I feel like that was one of the first ones that connected them. But then actually when I started listening to the songs and looking at the kind of color scheme and the outfits from that era, I was like, you know what? I actually think I'm onto something here. So the outfits from this era felt very kind of like boho. They're very early 2000s. And I feel like out of everyone on the show, Vanessa kind of captures that sense of fashion from that time the best, I think. I think maybe because the other characters on the show, the other female characters on the show were a lot of designer and more like high-end things that you would find on the runway, whereas obviously Vanessa is supposed to be the more relatable of the group. So I think that's why she dresses more accurately to like how we would have been dressing at this time, as opposed to obviously Blair and Serena. So I thought this matched her really well. We see a lot of, jeans and denim and cute, like short little boho printed dresses and printed tops and a similar kind of color scheme, blues, greens, and like floral, all that kind of stuff really that we see from Taylor in this era. I feel like we also see from Vanessa across most of the show. So, yeah, I thought this was a pretty good match. Also, this one specific picture of Taylor that I saw when I was looking on Pinterest at this era was this picture in the silver dress. And it instantly reminded me of when Vanessa wears the silver dress to the Snowflake Ball. I was like, this is sealed the deal for me. So first up, I chose Picture to Burn because it's my personal favorite from the album because I love this song so much. But I felt like it kind of represented her relationship with Dan quite well, because I feel like throughout their relationship, he never truly like prioritized her. And I feel like at the end of it, she didn't really get anything out of it. They ended up ending on bad terms and ultimately becoming basically enemies at the end of it. And the quote that I chose was, "There's no time for tears, I'm just sitting here planning my revenge." And because of the way that Dan had treated her and the fact that he had basically turned her against Serena by playing the both of them, I feel like. And so then that fueled Vanessa into wanting to obviously get revenge on Serena when Juliet came to town. Then I went with The Outside, and I feel like this one's kind of self-explanatory, but the lyric I went with was, nobody's ever let me in and I can still see you. This ain't the best view on the outside looking in. And I think out of everyone, even though Dan is kind of called the ultimate insider, about like, because he was on the outside and whatever, and he went in to the Upper East Side world, I think that Vanessa is the only one that is truly the outsider throughout the whole thing. Because Jenny has her moment as Queen Bee. She goes to their school. Dan obviously goes to the school, dates someone from the Upper East Side. And even when Vanessa dated Nate, he was kind of the least involved in that Upper East Side world at that time. And I feel like Vanessa is the only one that truly actually stays on the outside of the group and never really gets let into their world. And then lastly, kind of in that same vein, to be fair, is A Place in This World. And the lyric I went with was, I'm alone on my own and that's all I know. I'm just a girl trying to find a place in this world. And I think, again, that just correlates to Vanessa trying to find her footing and her place in the Upper East Side, because obviously when she had left and she had been with Dan before, he didn't really have any interest in that world. There was none of that. So when she came back, she was like, if I want to be friends with Dan, I have to fit in with Serena. And then she starts dating Nate, and obviously Nate is a big part of that world. And initially it's fine because he's kind of rebelling against it and she doesn't really have to enter into it too much. But then when he starts to make amends with his grandfather and the Vanderbilts, she kind of gets lost in amongst all of that, and he kind of ultimately ends up choosing them over her. And I think she is just constantly throughout the show trying to find her place, but never really finds it.
At the end of the day, you're an outsider just like me. And if it's ever between one of us and Serena Vanderwoodson, they will always choose Serena.
So next up we have Fearless, which is obviously Taylor's second album. And for this one, I went with Nate Archibald, our golden boy. I usually see people giving Fearless to Serena. I don't know if it's because obviously Serena, as I talked about in my Serena deep dive, her color is gold. She wears a lot of gold. Obviously, she is kind of the golden girl, I suppose, and she has the blonde hair and everything like that. But I went with Nate because I felt like he actually kind of resonated with the album a little bit more. And when we get to Serena, I couldn't put her anywhere other than where I put her. So leave your predictions now. So yeah, the first thing that drew me to Nate for Fearless was obviously the kind of gold. That's the color of this era, and Nate is considered to be the golden boy. He's obviously got that golden blonde hair and he's kind of the good boy. He is the nice one. And so I kind of felt like there was that link. And again, the kind of outfits from this time, like this one of Taylor in the white dress, reminded me of Nate at the white party. We have gold dresses and we also have black dresses, and just Taylor's kind of cute, like the love signs and all the cute like smiley pictures. I don't know, it just really gave me like Nate Archibald golden retriever energy.
I found this when you left, and I thought you might need it, so.
I did. That was really nice of you.
Well, I'll let you get back to work.
Yeah, I'll see you. Bye.
Now, in terms of the songs, the first one that I went for was The Way I Loved You. And for me, I felt like this was more about, it reminded me of his relationship with Blair, and that love triangle that he has with Blair and Serena. So the lyric that I went for was, my heart's not breaking because I'm not feeling anything at all, and you were wild and crazy, just so frustrating, intoxicating, complicated, got away by some mistake. And I thought this was kind of a perfect representation, because initially with the my heart's not breaking because I'm not feeling anything at all is how he was with Blair. It's the same in the books, it's the same in the show. He just does not love her in the way that he loved Serena. Whatever happens in this initial bit, like when we first see them together for the first time, he just does not seem fussed about anything. He's not engaged in this relationship. Whereas as soon as Serena comes back to town, like that, he is engaged, he is wanting to talk to her, wanting to see her. And obviously Serena, when she was old Serena, wild, crazy, incredibly complicated because she was Blair's best friend, his girlfriend's best friend, and then got away by some mistake, is obviously not only sleeping with Serena while he was with Blair, and then Serena fled town, but also we had the whole thing with Pete Fairman, and then when she left, he decided to stay with Blair, which ultimately kind of wasn't the right choice. And I think you can tell when she comes back that he kind of always regretted not actually telling her how he felt about her. And then I went for Fearless, and I went with But You're Just So Cool, Run Your Hands Through Your Hair, Absentmindedly Making Me Want You, and I don't know how it gets better than this. So for some songs, I chose ones that I felt like almost could be sung by the character about scenarios that had happened to them. And for others, I had chosen songs that I felt like sounded they were about the character. So for me, this is just kind of encapsulates Nate Archibald. The date that she sings about in Fearless, I feel like could have easily been a date, like a way that someone would feel after going on a date with Nate Archibald, because I feel like he is kind of the effortlessly gorgeous one of the group, and he has the most relationships in the group, and he's kind of always, they make not jokes, but they always make comments about how, you know, like good looking he is and how handsome he is and everything like that. And lastly, we have one of my favorite songs from this album, because I think it is so beautiful, and it is Coming with the Rain. And for me, I felt like this was, again, felt very much like Serena and Nate's relationship, well, specifically how Nate had felt about Serena. So I'll leave my window open because I'm too tired at night to call your name. Just know I'm right here hoping that you'll come in with the rain. I've watched you so long, screamed your name. I don't know what else I can say. And this, for me, just felt exactly like how Nate feels about Serena, in that he had loved her for so long throughout his whole relationship with Blair, up until she left, probably the whole time that she was away. And then when they do finally get together in season 3, the way that he talks about her and how he kind of confesses that he likes her makes it seem like he did love her the whole time, which I thought was really, really sweet. And it just seemed like he always held a candle for her and always just adored her. Even when she had chosen Dan, even when she had left town, he kind of always hoped that she would come back to him.
You left me?
Of course I did.
Now we're at Speak Now, which, is it my favourite album? I think it might be. I always chop between a few, but I adore Speak Now. And for Speak Now, I went with the one and only Blair Waldorf. So for this one, it was definitely based a lot more on the songs and the feel of the album. I think the kind of feel of this album is it's the one that she wrote entirely herself. It's what she feels like is her album, and I think that kind of encapsulates Blair very well. She's very independent. She is so sure of who she is and never kind of wavers from that and always speaks her mind. This one, there was this one picture of Taylor in this kind of gold silver dress, and it really reminded me of Blair's dress that she wears when her and Louis get engaged. I thought that was a really pretty parallel there. And then in terms of this era, obviously it is purple through and through. It is I feel like out of all the albums, this is the one that truly is just centered around that color. And Blair does wear quite a bit of purple in the show, but ultimately, like I said, for me, it was more about the feel of the album and the songs. But I did find some from this era that I feel like kind of matched her vibe, and there was kind of like a princess kind of feeling to this album, very whimsical, and also the ones about the wedding and stuff. And when Taylor comes, that picture of Taylor coming down the stairs in the dress and the song about the wedding kind of made me think about when Blair runs away from her own wedding to Louis. So in terms of the songs, I went for Haunted, which is one of my all-time favorites. And the lyrics I chose were: some things made your eyes go cold, don't leave me like this, I thought I had you figured out, something's gone terribly wrong, you're all I wanted. And I feel like this is Cher to a absolute T. honestly, take your pick for moments that this could apply to. When Blair tells Chuck that that she loves him after the funeral, and he doesn't say anything really, or he says that's too bad and gets into the car. The whole thing with the hotel, when she tells him that she's engaged. There are so many times when Blair had loved him so much and just wanted him so badly, and he just always finds a way to ruin it or to be cold and to act callous towards her. I think especially with the hotel thing, like that thought I had you figured out line is just, it's so that I feel like at that point she truly thought she had him figured out because they were dating and everything was going really well. So then for him to turn around and do something so horrible again, I think really surprised and devastated her.
I never thought that the worst thing you would ever do would be to me.
Then I feel like the absolute anthem of Blair Waldorf is Better Than Revenge. I went with She Should Keep in Mind There Is Nothing I Do Better Than Revenge, and do you still feel like you know what you're doing, because I don't think you do. And that is just Blair to a T. She's constantly scheming. She one-ups absolutely everybody on this show, whether it be Jenny, Vanessa, Juliet, Mrs. Carr, absolutely anybody. But Bass, there is nobody that can truly double-cross Blair Waldorf. Then I went for mine, and I feel like mine you could maybe think would be about Chuck and her relationship with him, or her relationship with Dan. But no, I actually went with her friendship with Serena. Braced myself for the goodbye because that's all I've ever known. Then you took me by surprise. You said, I'll never leave you alone. She is the best thing that's ever been mine. And I'm going to do a whole video about this, how I believe that Blair and Serena are the true soulmates of Gossip Girl, okay? Because their friendship, obviously it has lots of ups and downs throughout the show, but I think that Serena was the true love of Blair's life. And not in a romantic sense, but in a true, like, soulmate sense. I think nobody ever put Blair, I think it's like Jack that says something like nothing turns Chuck Bass upside down like losing Blair Waldorf, and I think that is true for Blair, but Serena, nothing turns Blair Waldorf upside down like losing Serena. And we see this obviously when she had left and gone to boarding school. That was a real turning point for Blair, and it was really hard for her to kind of allow her back in to her life. And it seemed like there were points when she would leave, but actually she didn't, and she stayed. And she was always kind of there for Blair. In the later seasons, it gets a little bit more, their friendship kind of loses a little bit towards the end. But in the early seasons especially, there was nothing that Serena wouldn't have done for Blair. And I think it was really just so sweet. And yeah, I just loved it. You know, brace myself for the goodbye, because obviously Serena had left and her dad had left and Nate, but Serena stuck by her, even when I think Blair wasn't sure that she would.
Why did you leave without saying goodbye? You're supposed to be my best friend. I miss you so much.
We'll get through this together.
Promise? Promise.
So now we're moving on to Red, and for Red I went with Lily Vanderwoodson, icon, mother, okay, mother. So I felt like the fashion from this time was a little bit more, I don't know, it just felt different. I feel like for the first few albums we had kind of the boho vibe. Obviously we had a lot of like the cowboy boots still and everything like that. Short, cute dresses, more like flowy, A-line dresses, kind of like a kind of princessy, whimsical, cutesy vibe. And I feel like with Red, it kind of shifted into a more chic vibe, a different, more adult vibe for her. And I think that this kind of resonates with Lily's more casual style. I feel like not so much towards the end of the show, but definitely in like season 1 and 2, she was pulling out just chic looks, like what do I call it, like off-duty model looks. I feel like we saw kind of a more toned down color palette from Taylor around this time, and yeah, she just looked chic. She looked sleek. And I think that really captures Lily as well, in that kind of vibe. So then in terms of songs, I went with The Very First Night. And for this one I had I'm the One on the Phone as You Whisper, Do You Know How Much I Miss You? I Wish We Could Go Back in Time and I'd Say to You I Miss You Like It Was the Very First Night. And this for me felt so season 1 Lily and Rufus, because obviously we have when he calls her to tell her that he misses her or that he never stopped loving her when he's out in the snow, and he leaves that message for her on the phone, and just the idea that they still loved each other and they kind of wish they could go back in time to when they were together. And yeah, I just thought this was just them to a T. Then I went with Begin Again, which is one of my all-time favorites. And I went with I've been spending the last 8 months thinking all love ever does is break and burn and end. And for this, I went more down the route of her past relationships, not so much with Rufus, but with William and with her other husbands, the Klauses and everything like that, because I think Lily had gotten to a point where it was a lot about money and less about love, and that it was always kind of going to end badly. Obviously, William had left. They don't really say what happened with the Klauses, but it seems like, you know, that wasn't really sustainable relationships there. And then obviously Bart ends up dying. And I think when she got back together with Rufus, that was the first time that, well, maybe not the first time, but, you know, one of the first times that she had truly felt loved by somebody. And I think Rufus was so genuine and exactly what she needed, to kind of believe in love again in a way. And I went with I Bet You Think About Me, which is one of my favourite Taylor songs of all time. And I went with I Bet You Think About Me when you're out at your cool indie music concerts every week. And I think this is just so her and Rufus. Like, and it's just so true, because even when he was married to Allison, and he was performing and she was off and she was married to William, that man was still in love with her. That man was still in love with her. And then as soon as they were reunited in season 1, he was hooked. The man was hooked. She literally married somebody else. She didn't want a bar of him, all this stuff, and he was still there. And specifically the scene that I picture is when she takes Serena to go and meet Dan, and she ends up seeing him perform one of his songs with Lincoln Hawk. I picture that, like, with this song. I think it's so good. Then we have 1989, and 1989 Taylor's version actually just came out a few days ago when I'm filming this. It's impeccable. So good. And for 1989, I chose Serena van der Woodsen, the New York it girl herself.
How can anyone not love New York?
I feel like, so this was during the time when Taylor had moved to New York, and she was just serving New York it girl. She just was. And that is Serena to an absolute T. Pictures of her like out and about in New York, it was giving Serena van der Woodsen just constantly. I feel like we had, you know, quite a lot of like black, more like sultry looks. We also had gold. We had just like beachy vibes mixed with, yeah, like sleek New York City girl vibes. And I think, yeah, it just captures Serena so perfectly. And the fact that her and Blake Lively are besties, I think it's just the most beautiful friendship. It really is. It's just iconic. So with everyone else, obviously, like I said, I had 3 songs picked, but I had 3 picked for Serena. And then when Taylor's version came out, I added another one. So the first one is Welcome to New York, because I feel like that's just easy. That is just a classic. The lights are so bright, but they never blind me. Welcome to New York. It's been waiting for you. And firstly, Serena always talks about how much she loves New York. And I think that the lights are so bright, but they never blind me is kind of perfect for her like socialite status. I feel like she is constantly the most famous, well, aside from when Blair marries Louis. In the early seasons, she's the most famous one. She's the one that has the paparazzi around her. She, you know, models in Eleanor's show and all this stuff, but it never and she's like the subject of Gossip Girl, but it never overwhelms her, and she kind of takes it in her stride and enjoys being that center of attention. Then I went with Clean, which is truly one of the most beautiful songs ever written. And I went with The Water Filled My Lungs, I Screamed So Loud But No One Heard a Thing, Rain Came Pouring Down, When I Was Drowning, That's When I Could Finally Breathe. And I think that is just Serena so much. She struggles so much throughout the show, I think specifically in the earlier seasons, and obviously when we see her as like old Serena. And I think that Lily had such a grasp on her and Eric and their reputation, and just the idea that everything reflected back onto her and how much, you know, and how good of a mother she was. And I think Serena's drinking and her partying kind of came from that strained relationship with her mum, and also the absence of William. And I think When I Was Drowning, That's When I Could Finally Breathe kind of feels like when she was putting herself in these situations of being wild and being crazy, that was kind of the one thing in her life that she could control. And I think, you know, Finally Clean is kind of when she comes back and she is trying to be a better person and trying to be the new Serena and kind of cut out that kind of wild side of herself. Then I have I Wish You Would, which just felt very Serena and Dan to me, especially the lyric, I wish you knew that I'd never forget you as long as I live. And I think this is just Serena's view of Dan. 100%. She genuinely loved and adored him throughout the whole show, I believe. There is so many points where she almost goes back to him when she chooses him over everyone else. And when she says to him at Blair's wedding, you know, she says that it's always been him and she has always loved him. And she even says to Lily in the first season, when Lily wants to be with Rufus, she asks Lily, is Rufus the most important thing in your life? Because that is what Dan is to me. And I think across the 6 seasons, she never really lost that and always had that feeling that they would get back together, or at least, you know, she'd never forget him, would always love him, even if they weren't together. And then lastly, the one that I added in at the end is from Slut, which is obviously one of the new Vault tracks. And I went with, I'll pay the price, you won't, but if I'm all dressed up, they might as well be looking at us. And if they call me a slut, you know it might be worth it for once. And if I'm gonna be drunk, I might as well be drunk in love. And I think Serena, more so in the books, actually, I was really shocked when reading them about the level of slut shaming that Serena experiences, especially from Blair and her friends and kind of everyone, to be honest. And I think we do see this in the show as well. She is judged. They make comments about how many people she slept with, and, you know, they had that scene with Nate where he is talking about when he lost his virginity to her, and she says, oh, and that reflects poorly on me and not you.
I mean, everyone knows the stories about Adam Handler, Jake Hendrickson, Matt Price, oh, the art teacher from prom.
I didn't sleep with all of those guys, Nate. Haven't you heard of locker room gossip? They lied or exaggerated.
And yeah, I think she has a lot of that throughout the show. And I think her character experiences a lot of that in the kind of Gossip Girl fandom, if you will, as well. And I just love Serena. And I think she is, at her core, a hopeless romantic and misunderstood and harshly judged, especially in the first few seasons, by the characters around her. And the part in, is it over now? I'm pretty sure. When she says, I think about jumping off a very tall something just to see you come running. That's literally Serena. I'm telling you, out of all the ones on this list, 1989 is the one I'm most confident about with Serena, because it's so her. Because she literally was like, I'm gonna go through the paparazzi, I'm gonna be out every night, I want to be on every newspaper, every magazine. She took that horse, all that stuff, to try and get William's attention and hope that he would come back and reach out to her. I'm telling you, I could probably go through I was just keeping it down to like 3. Well, now Serena's at 5, but I think I could go through every single song on 1989, including the Vault tracks, and assign them to Serena in some way. She just is that album. She is the moment. So for Reputation, I went with Georgina Sparks, and I think this might be a bit of a controversial one. I feel like a lot of people go with Jenny for this just because Jenny wears a lot of black, but I felt like this just resonated with Georgina more. Specifically when I saw her in this dress that had a snake print all over it, I was like, I mean, that's iconic, absolutely. And I think in this era we did see a lot of black, again, a lot of like sleek looks and darker eye makeup, and I just think that suits Georgina's style a lot. I know that obviously Jenny wears a lot of black and she does have dark eye makeup, but Georgina wears it in a way that definitely feels more like city it girl, kind of like the anti it girl in a way. Does that make sense? Like the villain it girl, maybe not the anti it girl, but like the villain it girl. And I absolutely love that about her, and I think just the whole vibe of Reputation and that feeling of revenge and everything, that is her. That really just is her. So for the first song I went with I Did Something Bad, and I went with They Say I Did Something Bad, but Why Does It Feel So Good? Most fun I ever had, and I'd do it over and over again if I could. This is Georgina. She is constantly doing bad shit. She's constantly blackmailing. She's worming her way into social events to try and ruin them. And she genuinely has a good time when she is doing it. And it doesn't matter what it is, it never stops her. Even when she went away to Jesus camp, the second they brought her back in for a scheme, she was hooked again.
And it's really just the worst thing. Please let me in on whatever scheme everyone seems to be a part of. I haven't conspired since I convinced Dan he was Milo's dad.
Then I went with Endgame, big reputation, you and me, we got big reputations, and you heard about me, I've got some big enemies. And that is just like her reputation, you know, it's like my reputation precedes me, hers genuinely does, because when Serena starts getting those gifts, and literally all we see of Georgina in that first bit is just the letter that she sends with the G on it. Absolutely iconic. Absolutely iconic. Serena is shaking in her boots. She shows it to Chuck. Chuck is also like, oh shit, it's Georgina. We know she is the real deal. From the moment she steps onto the scene, she has a humongous reputation, and it makes her absolutely iconic. And in terms of the big enemies, obviously, she has Blair as an enemy, and that's a pretty big enemy. Chuck at points. Serena, yeah. She goes after absolutely everybody. And then she's almost killed by Russians, I think. So yeah, some pretty big enemies there. And then lastly, I have Ready for It. Stealing hearts and running off and never saying sorry. But if I'm a thief, then he can join the heist and we'll move to an island. And I thought of Dan and Georgina. I feel like they kind of get forgotten about as the fact that they were even a couple. I mean, I don't know if they weren't really officially a couple, but obviously they kissed back in season 1, and then they are hooking up in season 3, and then they kind of become a power duo in the final season when she is kind of his publicist, editor, all this stuff for Inside Out, the chapters that he is writing. And yeah, I feel like she's ultimately the catalyst for why Dan and Serena break up in the first season. So, you know, stealing hearts, running off, never saying sorry. And then, yeah, she kind of brings him into her way of thinking and her more malicious side in season 6. It's definitely a different side to Dan than we had seen up until that point. Moving on to Lover, I have chosen Rufus, okay? I love Rufu. And this might seem like a bizarre one. I've seen people put Jenny from season 1 as Lover. I've seen people put Serena as Lover, Blair. So yeah, I put Rufus as Lover, okay? And I feel like I'm right. Firstly, I mean, you've got the obvious link that they are both singers. I'm really clutching at straws here, but it's okay, it's fine. Roll with me. And so I really liked this parallels picture. And now this is definitely one where it's about the songs and the lyrics, and it's not about the aesthetic and the vibes, because Rufus doesn't wear a lot of pink. He wears some powder blues though, so there's that going for him. And he is just a cutie. That's the vibes. That's it. That's the vibes. So in terms of songs, I went with Daylight. I don't want to think of anything else now that I thought of you. I've been sleeping so long in a 20-year dark night. I once believed that love would be black and white, but it's golden, and I can still see it all in my head back and forth from New York. And for me, I felt like this was, it was hard because a lot of them I felt like, oh my God, this is so Lily and Rufus. But actually, I felt like this was kind of, it could kind of reference Allison, the 20-year, dark night, where he had just kind of, held this candle for Lily, but had been with Allison. And obviously it had Jenny and Dan. So we're looking at like a good, maybe like 18, 20 years that they had been together, him and Allison. And then ultimately she leaves him for someone else. They're not going to go back and forth from Hudson to Brooklyn, and they ultimately decide to end things. And he's very hurt by this and by her lack of care for him. So love being black and white. But then when he finally gets together with Lily, that is when he kind of sees that it can be golden. And then I went with paper rings, and this is a very literal one. I'd marry you with paper rings, darling, you're the one I want. And this is because when Rufus proposes to Lily, not like when he, decides that he's going to propose to Lily, he decides to just do it there and then. And he proposes with a paper ring that he makes out of like an old Lincoln Hawk, wristband, I think, or something. And it's just a really, really sweet scene.
I don't have a ring, so this will have to do. Marry me, Lily.
Yes.
Give me a hand.
Lastly, I went with Afterglow, and obviously this is a song about a relationship, but I kind of likened it to Jenny and Rufus's feud. So we have Why'd I Have to Break What I Love So Much? It's on your face, don't walk away, because obviously Rufus, it's a tricky one because obviously Jenny is rebelling, but I think Rufus is what truly fans the flames and just makes it so much worse. And don't walk away. Obviously, at one point, Jenny was planning on becoming emancipated from Rufus. So there's that. And then, but it's not what I meant. I'm sorry that I hurt you. I don't want to do this to you. I don't want to lose this with you. And again, I think that just kind of is, towards that he, in the end, just felt like he loved her and missed her, and that was it. And he didn't care about the fashion, he didn't care about any of that. He just wanted her back and felt like he had taken it too far. Then for folklore, I have a Jenny. I adore Jenny. Everyone that watches this channel knows that she's that bitch. That's my girl. Okay, that's my gal through and through. So the color palette for this one is a lot more muted, a lot more toned down. We see a lot of grays, tartan, plaid, things like that. And I think Jenny, even though she does wear a lot of black, she also wears a lot of gray and a lot of patterns. And I don't know, I just felt like the vibes lined up here. Yeah, like I said, darker color palette. Jenny just kind of, she encapsulates that. And she also wears a lot of really sleek looks as well, that are really nice. I feel like Jenny's fashion sense is actually really underrated. I absolutely loved how she dressed on the show. Then in terms of songs, I went with My Tears Ricochet. I can go anywhere I want, just not home. And for me, I was like, this is her to a T, obviously, because she gets banished from New York, and Blair says that she is never allowed to return, so she can go anywhere in the world, but she can't come back home. Then I went with Betty for kind of Nate and Jenny's brief love affair. If you watch this channel, then you know that I absolutely adored Jenny and Nate. I thought they were so sweet together. And we have, will you have me? Will you love me? Will you kiss me on the porch in front of all your stupid friends? If you kiss me, will it be just like I dreamed it? Will it patch your broken wings? I'm only 17. I don't know anything, but I know I miss you. And I felt like, in front of all your stupid friends was definitely the fact that they didn't really accept Jenny, but obviously Nate was one of them. And he was kind of willing to be with her despite that. And that for her, it was kind of this whirlwind of Nate actually wanting her and someone from the Upper East Side, you know, kind of being interested in her. And I'm only 17, I don't know anything, but I know I Miss You was kind of like, I think she's actually 15 when they get together, but the kind of essence of it I liked, because I felt like she was in such a crazy place in her life when she was with Nate and all this stuff that was going on, and she felt like she didn't really know what was going on, but she had dreams and things that she wanted to pursue, and one of those things that she kind of was sure about was how she felt about Nate.
You kissed me again.
I know.
So, does that mean you don't regret last week?
Guess not. Jenny, whatever you decide, I'm with you.
Okay.
And lastly, when I listened to Mad Woman, I was like, this is Jenny Humphrey coded. It just is. It just is. So what a shame she went mad. No one likes a mad woman. You made her like that. And I'm not going to go into it too much because I talk about it all the time. And you can go and watch my Jenny Humphrey Deserves a Better video if you want to hear me rant about the mistreatment of Jenny Humphrey for an hour. But ultimately, you know, all the things that Jenny turned into, all the things that everyone hates about Jenny and that they criticize her for, Blair made her that way. The Upper East Side made her that way. It made her ruthless. It made her selfish and all this stuff. And everything that she does is nothing worse than what all the others had done to each other over the years. And yet she is the one that is the villain for it. And ultimately, you know, that they made her so sad and so isolated and so alone that she went and obviously had slept with Chuck, and then everyone is mad at her. Everyone's mad at her for being callous, and everyone's mad at her for everything when they are the ones that made her that way. Okay, then we have Evermore, and for Evermore I went with Dan. Daniel Humphrey, Gossip Girl himself. This one was easy for me in terms of the aesthetic because I feel like we have a lot of browns, a lot of earth tones, again, a lot of tartan plaid, and Dan wears a lot of clothes like that. He wears comfy things like cardigans, and he wears tartan shirts, lots of, like I said, yeah, browns, beiges, and I feel like that more casual, laid back style that he has just fits really well with the aesthetic of this album. Now, in terms of songs, I went for Gold Rush, Everybody Wants You, Everybody Wonders What It Would Be Like to Love You, What Must It Be Like to Grow Up That Beautiful with Your Hair Falling into Place Like Dominoes. And for me, this kind of sounded like if Dan was writing this about Serena, because everybody kind of wanted to be with Serena. Obviously, you had Nate, and she is the it girl. She was the most popular girl in school, and Dan was the one that ended up with her and was able to truly love her and be with her, while everyone else kind of just fawned over her. And then What Must It Be Like to Grow Up That Beautiful? I think Dan, a lot throughout the show, compares himself and doesn't know how to handle the fact that Serena grew up in this Upper East Side world and that she just has things handed to her and that things are a lot easier for her than they are for him.
If you ever wanted something so badly, but you just know you're not gonna get it. No, that's right. I forgot who I'm talking to, of course, yeah. But that was my whole life.
Then Willow, I felt like, spoke more to Dan and Blair's relationship. You know that my train, it could take you home. Anywhere else is hollow. I'm begging for you to take my hand, wreck my plans. And I think this happened to them on both sides. Because on Dan's side, he was not expecting to fall in love with Blair at all. Obviously, they have a very rocky friendship throughout the seasons up until they become close. And this was probably not what he had planned at all. And similarly for Blair, you know, she had never been interested in Dan, and they have this conflict over their two separate worlds, you know, even more so than Serena. I think Serena was more willing to come into Dan's world, whereas we have a whole episode about how it's Brooklyn and it's the Upper East Side, and Blair has these kind of like high tastes and expensive, you know, things that she wants to do, whereas Dan is more like sitting in cafes and you know, all this stuff. And how they were going to kind of come together with that. And then I'm begging for you to take my hand. I feel like Dan was just so hopelessly in love with her for such a long time and just so desperately wanted her to choose him. And then lastly, this one for me was just kind of a funny one. And I went with no body, no crime. And specifically, somebody's got to catch him out because I think he did it, but I just can't prove it. And obviously, for me, this is him being Gossip Girl, the big secret of the show. I think he did it, but I just can't prove it. Yeah, the fact that he is Gossip Girl the whole time and nobody is ever able to catch him out. Like, until the very end, really. Nate gets kind of close, but ultimately it is Dan that comes forward and admits that it was him. And then last but certainly not least, we have Midnights. And for Midnights, I went with Chuck Bass. And Midnights has a very dark colour scheme, one that I feel like fits with Chuck really well. There's a lot of black, there's a lot of dark blues, and those kinds of more cool toned colours, which I think Chuck wears a lot of those. And the kind of aesthetic of this whole photo shoot was, you know, staying up late at night and the kind of troubles that Taylor was feeling and those midnight, you know, 3 a.m. Thoughts and feelings. And I think there's a lot of like hurt in this album, even though a lot of it's quite upbeat. And I think that is Chuck, and that really kind of resonated with me when I was thinking about Chuck's character. So for songs, I feel like the most obvious one is obviously Anti-Hero. I should not be left to my own devices. They come with prices and vices. I end up in crisis. I wake up screaming from dreaming. One day I'll watch as you're leaving because you got tired of my scheming. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. At tea time, everybody agrees. And this is Chuck Bass. This is Chuck Bass. It just is. Like, you can't deny. Because I should not be left to my own devices. What he gets up to when he is by himself, and he's just in his loner eras, you know, prices and vices, the drinking, drugs, the sleeping, you know, with anyone and everyone. And, you know, end up in crisis. I feel like he always ends up spiraling, whether it's in his war with Bart, whether it's when he loses Blair, his war with Jack, you know, and then screaming from dreaming one day, I'll watch as you're leaving because you got tired of my scheming. For me, that is him and Blair. I think he constantly kind of felt like he wasn't good enough for her, that she was going to leave him, or that, you know, ultimately he lets her go with Louis because he believes that Louis is the person for her and that he is not good enough and, you know, won't give her what she needs, and he just wants her to be happy even if that's not with him.
Chuck, why did you just do that?
Because I love her. I can't make her happy.
And yeah, I'm the problem, it's me at tea time, everybody agrees. I think numerous points throughout the show, everybody turns on Chuck at some point. We have Nate turning on Chuck when he finds out about the hotel. We have, obviously, initially Chuck is very much the villain. Serena, Jenny, Dan all hate Chuck, and then in the end, even Lily, who had always believed in him, believed that he was trying to destroy their family and also turned on him. Then I chose You're on Your Own, Kid, and for this I put, I waited ages to see you there. I searched the party of better bodies just to learn that you never cared. You're on your own, kid, you always have been. And I think, yeah, he always was, but never loved him truly, or if he did, it was in a very weird way. He wasn't caring, he wasn't supportive, and I think that Chuck just carried that throughout his whole life, at least until, you know, him and Blair started to work on those things. And specifically the scene that I thought of was when he has to stand by himself for the Bass family portrait. I thought that was really, really sad. Then I chose Maroon for Chuck and Blair, and I went with I See You Every Day Now, and I choose you, the one I was dancing with in New York, No Shoes. And yeah, I just love them. I think their love was one of the best parts of the show, and despite things being hard, they still continue to choose each other time after time. And that is it. That is my ranking, no, not ranking, how I chose the eras. Okay, my camera died and I can't be bothered to put it back on the tripod, but yes, that is my ranking. Why do I keep saying that? It's because I do so many ranking videos on this channel. Yes, that is how I assigned all of the Taylor Swift eras to all of the main Gossip Girl characters. Please let me know down in the comments if you agreed with my choices. Did you, who would you have swapped out? Who did you agree with? Who would you have changed? And yeah, like I said, let me know your favorite Gossip Girl character. Let me know your favorite Taylor Swift era. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.